The house was quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in a while. With Marcus gone for the weekend on a tech conference in Seattle, I expected to enjoy the rare stillness. No loud morning calls. No chaotic debates about where the missing charger had gone. Just me, a book I wouldn't finish, and a bottle of wine I probably would. But Marcus had one last-minute request before leaving. Let Chris crash for a night or two. He just turned 18, and his brother's out of town. You remember him from the pool party, right? I remembered. Chris had the kind of presence that filled a room, even when he said nothing. Tall for his age, with that untamed, sun-kissed hair and a smile that always bordered on smug. At the pool party last month, he hadn't even bothered wearing a shirt most of the day. He'd splashed water like a kid, then stretched out on the sunbed like a magazine model. I remember catching Marcus watching him once, his eyes lingering, but I pushed the thought away. Sure, I'd replied, he can stay. Now here he was, standing in my doorway, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a crooked grin on his face. Hope it's not weird, Chris said, stepping inside. Marcus said you'd be cool with it. Not weird, I lied, gesturing toward the guest room. You remember the layout? He nodded, dropped his bag, and walked straight to the kitchen like he owned the place. Over dinner, it was surprisingly easy to fall into conversation. He talked about college applications, his dreams of moving to L.A., and how his brother was too strict. I mostly listened, smiling at the way he spoke with too much confidence and not enough experience. Later, we settled into the living room. I queued up a movie, and he sprawled across the sectional couch like he'd grown up in this house. His legs were long, his feet bare, and his tank top clung a little too closely to his chest. Can I ask you something? He said during a lull in the film. Go ahead. How long have you and Marcus been together? I turned slightly toward him. 10 years. Wow, he said, dragging the word out. Doesn't it get boring? I laughed, more defensively than I meant to. No relationship is exciting every day. That's not how real love works. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on me. I guess. Then, quieter, sometimes I wonder what real love even feels like. The moment lingered. I cleared my throat and pressed play again. By the time the credits rolled, he was half asleep, stretched out under a throw blanket. I told him good night and retreated to my room, leaving the door ajar in case he needed anything. Sometime after midnight, I woke with a dry throat. I stepped out, barefoot, toward the kitchen. The hallway was dimly lit, and the TV's blue glow still spilled from the living room. As I approached, I slowed. On the couch, a shape shifted beneath the blanket. I could hear quiet breaths. Then a faint sound, fabric rustling, quick and awkward. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I made out the curve of Chris's bare shoulder. I stood frozen for a second longer than I should have. He didn't notice me. Or maybe he did. I turned around, quietly stepping back down the hall. I told myself not to think too hard. He was probably just adjusting, half asleep, unaware. Back in my room, I lay awake. My ceiling fan spun in slow circles above me, doing nothing to cool the heat settling behind my eyes. I didn't know what I'd seen. I didn't know if I even wanted to know. But something about that moment wouldn't leave me alone. Not because of what he was doing, but because I wasn't sure why I hadn't turned on the light. And part of me wondered what I was afraid I'd find if I had. The next morning, the house looked exactly the same, but it didn't feel the same. Chris was already in the kitchen when I walked in, shirtless, humming some vague pop tune as he poured cereal. The muscles in his back shifted as he toned, and he flashed that same easy smile. Morning, he said, like we hadn't both silently crossed an invisible line the night before. I forced a grin. Sleep okay? Like a rock. He took a long sip of milk straight from the bowl, then grinned. Your couch is dangerously comfortable. I busied myself with the coffee maker, pretending not to notice how comfortable he was being half naked in a stranger's kitchen, or how close he stood when he reached over me for a spoon. So, Chris said, leaning against the counter, Marcus said you work from home. Like, all day? Pretty much. He tilted his head, eyes fixed on me. Isn't it lonely? Sometimes, I admitted, but I like the quiet. Chris didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared into his cereal bowl like it held secrets. Must be weird, being around someone all the time and still feeling alone. That landed harder than it should have. I studied him for a beat. He looked impossibly young in that moment, like someone trying to sound wiser than they were. But there was something behind his voice, an edge I couldn't place. We spent the rest of the day avoiding the tension we both clearly felt. I stayed in my office, pretending to answer emails. He wandered from room to room, occasionally peeking in to ask if I needed anything. I always said no. By evening, we found ourselves on opposite ends of the same couch again. A movie played, though neither of us was really watching. The silence between us grew thick, loaded. Every time I looked at the screen, I could feel Chris watching me. At one point, he shifted closer, pulling the blanket over both our legs. I didn't protest. "You don't talk much," he said softly. I looked over. "I talk when there's something worth saying." Chris smiled. "So say something real." I held his gaze a second too long. "What do you want me to say?" He reached out, fingers brushing my wrist, tentative but deliberate. "That you felt it too last night." The air in my lungs stalled. "This isn't a game, Chris." "I know." He leaned in slowly, as if giving me time to stop him. I didn't. Our lips met, brief, gentle, but shattering. When I pulled away, my heart was racing. "This is wrong." "Then why didn't you stop me?" he whispered. I stood up, pacing to the window like the glass would offer clarity. "Because I forgot who I was for a second." Chris walked up behind me, close but not touching. "Then let's forget for one more." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, low, vulnerable, full of something like hope or desperation. I turned to face him. The kiss this time wasn't soft. It was hungry, clumsy, electric. Hands slid under fabric, breath caught in throats, and restraint dissolved into something messier. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We didn't speak after. Later, Chris lay curled up beside me on the couch, silent, his head on my shoulder. I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. What just happened couldn't be undone. It wasn't just a guilt that burned. It was a terrifying truth that I didn't regret it. Not fully. Not yet. Chris sat up eventually, pulling the blanket around himself. He looked down at me and said, "I should leave tomorrow, before Marcus gets back." I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Okay." He paused, like he wanted to say more. But instead, he stood and disappeared down the hall. I sat there alone for a long time. The room smelled like citrus body wash and guilt. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. But I didn't move, because deep down, I knew the real damage wasn't what had just happened. It was how easily I'd let it. Marcus returned late Sunday afternoon, suitcase in one hand, smile in the other. He hugged me tightly the moment he walked in, the familiar warmth of his cologne wrapping around my guilt like a noose. "I missed you," he said into my neck. I didn't answer right away. My arms went around him, but not all the way. "How was Seattle?" I finally managed. "Same as always. Panels, pitches, overpriced coffee. I'm just glad to be home." He paused and glanced around. "Where's Chris?" "He left this morning," I said, too quickly. "Said he had to catch a ride with a friend." Marcus nodded, unfazed. "He texted me earlier. Seemed off." I turned toward the sink, pretending to rinse a glass. Maybe he's just tired. The lie tasted sour. That night, Marcus curled up beside me in bed, chatting about the conference, laughing at something a coworker did. I responded in fragments, my thoughts drifting. Every word he spoke felt like a drop in a still pond, and every ripple echoed what I had done. I'd expected regret to wash over me, drown me even. But instead, it lingered like fog, thick, quiet, and blurring everything. The days that followed moved slowly. I couldn't shake the silence Chris had left behind. No text, no call, no trace. But one afternoon, as I was answering emails, my phone lit up. A message from an unsaved number. "I'm sorry if I made things harder. I just needed you to see me." "Chris." My fingers hovered above the keyboard. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Later that week, Marcus brought up Chris again over dinner. He still hasn't answered me. I hope I didn't do something to upset him. I shrugged, focusing on my plate. Maybe he's just figuring things out. Marcus looked at me then, really looked. You've been distant lately, ever since I got back. Is everything okay? I nodded too quickly. Just stressed. Work's been a lot. He reached across the table and touched my hand. You can talk to me, Ben, about anything. Anything. I almost told him. It sat on the edge of my tongue, heavy and sharp, but instead, I swallowed it whole. That night, I watched him sleep beside me, peaceful, trusting, unaware. I turned to the ceiling and thought of Chris. His voice, his eyes, the way he said, "Don't pretend." Maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it wasn't even about him. Maybe it was about being seen again. 10 years is a long time. Long enough for comfort to blur into routine. Long enough to forget that desire has a voice too, and sometimes it whispers when you least expect it. I got out of bed quietly and walked to the living room. The couch looked exactly as it had that night. A simple piece of furniture holding 1,000 complicated memories. I sat down, ran a hand over the fabric, and closed my eyes. I didn't want to rewrite what had happened. I didn't want to pretend it meant nothing. But I also didn't want to destroy what Marcus and I had built. The truth was simple and devastating. I'd cheated. Not just with my body, but with the small, quiet parts of myself that I thought were immune. And now, I'd have to carry that. Not as punishment, but as a reminder that even love, real, deep, weathered love, has blind spots. Closing line. Some betrayals are loud. Mine was quiet, but it never stopped echoing.